Hello everybody and welcome to the start of a new series, Guild Wars 2 Mysteries. In these videos I want to talk about in a more bite-sized way than I've ever done before the main key mysteries and interesting things that are happening with the Guild Wars 2 universe. The kind of stuff that you're probably going to miss if you only play through the main storyline of the game, but nonetheless might be very important for where the game could go in expansions. Now, given that there was a recent interview with Colin Johansson about this, I thought it would be a good idea to start the first episode with the Jungle Dragon. So you shouldn't need me to tell you, or at least I really hope you don't need me to tell you, that the game launched with elder dragons as the main villains. If you didn't know that, I'd love to have a chat with you about what you thought the game ended like what all that with Zaitan was. But the game launched with 5 elder dragons. There have been 5 written into the lore, but really in-game we only ever interact with 4 of them. The 5th is the Deep Sea Dragon, whose name we don't actually have, though it does have the fan name Bubbles now, which is great. We probably won't get to interact with that guy until we have like an underwater expansion, you know, with tons of underwater content and with sunken ships and coral reefs and more underwater combat than you can shake a stick at. Isn't that exciting to you guys? Guys? No? Well, underwater expansion aside, we do have this 5th dragon that's already quite mysterious in amongst the 4 that we already know about. Kraukatoric, Primordus, Jormag and Zaitan. And that was fine established knowledge until this recent interview when Colin Johansson said...
in your personal opinion, which Elder Dragon you think would have the best setup for the first expansion?
Maybe the Crystal Dragon to see stories with Glint and how all of that ties together. I could see that being really compelling as well. You know, the Jungle Dragon, that's a whole region of Maguma and has a lot of history in Guild Wars 1. There's potential for that being exciting as well.
So in the middle of the answer to the question about expansions, he mentions a jungle dragon. That doesn't fit anything we've heard of any dragons before, at all. It doesn't match anything. So this is pretty crazy news. He also mentions the Maguma jungle, so does that mean this is where it could be? Just owing to the fact he calls it a jungle dragon. The obvious thing to do is look at all the jungles that are there in Guild Wars 2 right now, namely the continent of Tyria, since that's all we can explore for now, and that seems to be where all the Elder Dragons are centered too. Now the main jungle you would notice is a really big chunk of the map, honestly, now called the Maguma Wastes. See, 250 years ago, that area north of the Tarnished Coast, north of Ratasum and the Grove, that massive chunk of the world, that was called the Maguma Jungle. And back then, 250 years ago, it was brimming with life. It had some crusty looking badland areas to the tops of its dry cliffs, but it had a lot of life there too. Now, 250 years later, conveniently, it's dried up and it's desolate, and we can't go there anymore. Now, what do we know that the Elder Dragons do? Consume the world, eat magic, destroy life, right? So wouldn't it make sense that the Jungle Dragon is residing in this massive chunk of the world that was once a jungle and has now kind of been destroyed and possibly corrupted? Don't forget, a large motif of the Elder Dragons is that they shape and destroy the world around them until all of Tyria becomes desolate, and then they seem to go back to sleep. Now, a developer flippantly saying, oh, the Jungle Dragon, isn't necessarily the only hint we've ever had at the idea of 6 Elder Dragons. In fact, shortly after launch, I did a pretty long video on the idea of a 6th dragon that was tied to the Sylvari, and I'll get to that in a second. But there's a couple of things that I really want to point out in this video, though. First of all, the most basic hint we've always had is in the Dermid Priory. You don't even have to be a member of the Dermid Priory to experience this, but if you head over there, you can speak to an NPC who just casually says, without any second thought, oh, I remember a time long ago when it was the 5 ancient races against the 6 elder dragons. And he's totally fine with that, and you can't query him on that. He just says it. He just lays it out on the line. Now, do we believe that's a typo for one of the most important aspects of the game, or perhaps a hint that once, long ago, there were 6 dragons? Of course, there's a chance that the 6th dragon had died by now, but why would that one have been defeated and the others not? So we had this guy mentioning 6 Elder Dragons, but there's also a lot more compelling evidence to be found at the Crucible of Eternity. And not even necessarily inside the dungeon itself. You can go outside the dungeon into just the general Inquest lab that's there and find your first hint straight away. You see, this is an Inquest base. It's the Asura that are intent on ruling the world and controlling the eternal alchemy and being massive masterminds. And what they're trying to do here at the Crucible of Eternity is tap into the power of the various Elder Dragons. And that's evident in many ways, but the first way you see that is they have all these different zones, these little labs around on the surface, dotted around for you to go go and visit. Now, 5 of them seem 100% to be in reference to Elder Dragons. We've got kind of a crystal one for Gw2 I, there's a frosty looking one for Jormag, there's one for every single dragon. There's even a zone called Zone Blue that seems to be hinting at the Deep Sea Dragon, though the Inquest haven't managed to find any specimens to work their magics on. However, there's not just 5 zones, there's a 6th zone there, the number 6 once again, and inside the 6th zone you can see a very naturey looking area, which would tie into the idea of having a jungle dragon. So there's that extra zone. You can also look at this zone, Zone Green as it's called, and draw a lot of comparisons to the Sylvari. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that for this video. I've done a video before where I talked a lot about the Elder Dragons of the Sylvari. I believe just after launch was when I did it. I'm not going to bog this video down with that though. There's a whole other topic. I just want to talk to us about the idea that there is going to be another dragon. But yes, there is a lot of compelling evidence it could also be linked to the Sylvari. That's not all though. If you've actually played the dungeon, you'll be more than familiar with this guy. Subject Alpha. Yeah, this guy is a bitch. For regular casual dungeon runners, you're not going to have the nicest reaction to seeing this boss. This guy appears on all 3 paths of the Crucible of Eternity, and he is a mean, nasty piece of work in all of them. But in terms of the lore, he's actually pretty interesting. You guys might not know, but if you turn on your combat log in your chat box, if you switch that on while you're in PvE, and then you get hit by a skill that an enemy's used, you can actually learn the name of that skill, despite the fact you as a player would never be able to use it for yourself. When you do that with Subject Alpha, you find some really curious stuff. First of all, you can see him basically turn some Asuran corpses into Risen, just like Zaitan, and he summons those giant tentacle monster things as well, which is fantastic. So he does that, and he seems to have some relation to Zaitan. He also has a bunch of crystal attacks called imprisonment crystals that seem to bind him to Gw2 I, or at least have some semblance to a Gw2 I type attack. And then he's got a bunch of miscellaneous attacks that seem to do different elements, such as fire and ice for Jormag and Primordus. Now, if you actually have a look in your combat log when you get attacked by some of these things, you'll see that they specifically reference the Elder Dragons. Namely, we have the Teeth of Primordus, which is the fire attack, and we have the Teeth of Jormag, which is the icy attack. And lastly, we have the Teeth of Mordremoth, which is an earth attack, again kind of tying into this naturey theme. We have an earth attack, a row of spikes that he'll summon up at you. This is called the Teeth of Mordremoth. The Teeth of Primordus of Jormag and the Teeth of Mordremoth, as well as these extra attacks that seem to relate him to Zaitan and Gw2 I. So, what's Mordremoth? Could this be another dragon? It certainly sounds like it. Is this the name of the jungle dragon? It's not too far-fetched to think that the Inquest, Asura that live on the Tarnished Coast, right on the borders of the Maguma jungle, would have had some interaction with a jungle dragon that was positioned quite close by to them, just shortly to the north of them. So are these all hints that are tying at a 6th Elder Dragon? I don't really think it's my place to say, and that's going to be a point of this series. I want to show you guys these mysteries, these big questions that are out there right now. Nobody knows just yet, but it is possible that there's going to be a new Elder Dragon that we haven't really been introduced to just yet for a future expansion in the game. I'll leave you with one last little bit of information, particularly about the Crucible of Eternity. Before the game launched, ArenaNet released 2 Guild Wars novels, with a 3rd one due on the way. That 3rd novel still hasn't been released, and these days it's about Lion's Arch and the rise of Zaitan, being written by one of the lead world builders, Rhys Sosby. But in the original plans, that 3rd book wasn't going to be written by Rhys at all. It was going to be written by a different guy about a totally different thing. The title of the book, in the first instance, was going to be The Crucible of Eternity. Now, how could ArenaNet make an entire book about the Crucible of Eternity? There'd have to be something pretty major associated with that place, right, to do a whole novel on it. Well, maybe this is it. Maybe, before the game released, the 3rd book was going to introduce us to the final 6th Elder Dragon. But they decided, because even the Deep Sea Dragon still is a bit of a mystery to us, that could have been jumping the gun, and plans were changed. I don't know, that last bit's just my speculation. Maybe you agree with it, maybe you don't. In any case, that is the mystery of the 6th Elder Dragon. Who knows when we'll see him, if we ever do. Do let me know what you think about both the theory and the idea of this series going forward. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you liked my art skills, and I guess I will see you for another Guild Wars 2 mystery next time.